Amen to that.
Preach.
I feel like she summed it all up.
Welcome to How to Fail, the podcast that believes that most failures can teach us something meaningful. If you came of age in the 80s or 90s, you'll know Neneh Cherry. You'll know her music, the unique, unforgettable sounds of singles such as Manchild and Buffalo Stance, and the groundbreaking hip-hop pop crossover debut album, Raw Like Sushi. You might know the work of her brother and fellow musician Eagle-Eye Cherry. You'll probably have heard her chart-topping daughter Mabel on the radio. And you'll undoubtedly have come across another band who was shaped both by Cherry's musical influence and financial backing. Massive Attack's seminal trip-hop album Blue Lines was produced in the back bedroom Cherry shared with her husband Cameron McVeigh, their producer. Her creativity has spanned the decades and continued a family legacy. The daughter of a Swedish artist mother and a Sierra Leonean musician father, her parents separated shortly after Cherry was born, and she was raised by her stepfather, the legendary American jazz musician Don Cherry. It was an itinerant childhood with stints in Sweden, France, New York, Turkey, and London. But the one constant was the importance placed on artistic expression. When Cherry told her parents she wanted a break from school at the age of 14, they agreed. As she jokes in her forthcoming memoir, 1,000 Threads, she's still on that break. Her autobiography makes for fascinating and often moving reading. Cherry has weathered personal and professional storms, toured with bands including the Slits and Rip, Rig and Panic, appeared on Top of the Pops while 7 months pregnant, and met everyone from James Baldwin to Miles Davis and Chuck D. Now 60, she writes, "The beauty of becoming an older woman is that you finally feel that you're enough. You recognise that the failures and the fights are part of life." Neneh Cherry, welcome to How to Fail.
Hello.
I'm so happy to meet you.
I'm so happy to meet you.
I want to thank you for your music that got me through really difficult times at school. And I want to thank you for the book, which is so beautifully written. And one of the things that you say in 1,000 Threads is that you've always been a rebel. What is a rebel for you?
I think when you're a rebel, you ask questions, and I think you are just kind of like naturally going against the grain in a way. And I think being a rebel doesn't mean that you have to be out like running around with placards, like making, doing the obvious thing that it might bring to that you might picture. Like being an activist doesn't mean that you're necessarily standing out on a box on the corner.
Mm.
It means that you're in your daily life trying to, change things. And I think ask questions and, for me, I think also it's been a thing of like having a kind of an allergy towards things that are stereotypical.
Do you think that explains where your sound and your lyrics come from? It's just that you felt that there weren't rules that you needed to play by.
I guess I have a sound that it's kind of repetitive, but I'm also kind of going against my own grain constantly when it's time to kind of write or, do something new, where I'm always feeling like, well, I don't just want to hang back in the kind of disposition of the safety and God, of what I was doing before. Yeah. It's like I want to put, I want to try and move out into the next space, but you sort of take everything with you in a weird sort of way that you whatever it was that you were doing before. I guess that's why I find it quite terrifying, like when it's time to start a new album or when it's time to work on something new. If we look at like Raw Like Sushi, the album, which was like obviously an amazing gift, and I never expected anything as kind of as big as that. I think when I got to the end of that project, I was also like, conscious of the fact that it's very easy that you become caught up in the kind of the essence of pleasing.
Fascinating.
Do you know what I
Yes.
mean? And that you start
Yes.
thinking of rather than just making, you're thinking about where it's going to end up. In fact, when Massive Attack then kind of came into our world and started making their album in our house, it was actually like a godsend and like very medicinal, because hearing their process like kind of carried me through to my next place. And then I made an album called Homebrew, which was and I think it's just like constantly like, needing to evolve.
Well, thank you for the Massive Attack album too, because that was seminal for me
Well,
when I was a student.
Thank you to Massive Attack for the Massive Attack album.
That idea of pleasing is so interesting to me, because as women, we are raised, if we are a certain age, to be pliable and to think of others and to place their needs first. And I can imagine that as a woman of colour, there's an additional layer, especially because, as I said in the introduction, you had an itinerant childhood, but your experiences in Sweden as a child were not always positive. You stood out.
I stood out everywhere I went, and I stood out for different reasons. I stood out because of my heritage. I stood out because my family were different. We moved to a really small community, which had like really great aspects to it. Like not all of it was terrible, but I think that being constantly aware that everyone is aware of you. And I think the kind of shields and the multiple layers of self-protection to survive are, you could sort of say, like, I know that I committed as a very young girl to being kind of indestructible. Like nobody was going to eyeball me down, but I felt those eyes because of, obviously, or I wouldn't have responded. It's a lot to be with in your life all the time. And actually during COVID, when George Floyd died, I realized how much stuff had just happened on a daily basis throughout my life that you just don't, you just brush it aside.
Yes.
And I had to go out on the canal some days and just cry. But it kind of forced me to release some of the things that had just been sitting there. But sometimes, like, you just have to get mad about things. And I know that there were times when, I was juggling a lot that I didn't always sit with how I actually felt. It was just like, I've got to make this work. And I think as women, there's something very powerful in that, but also it can very much be, we can take ourselves for granted, and it is taken for granted.
Well, it leads us on to talking about mothering, which is something I want to ask you about, because I'm going to talk about your fathers as part of your failures. Not that they were, but they weave into the themes. But one of the very important parts of your book is your relationship with your own mother and how you show up as a mother, not just to your children, but to sort of wider friendship group. That idea of nurture is very important. And you're very honest in the book. And there's one particularly moving passage where you talk about your mother dying and how that almost undid you for a while.
I mean, it did undo me for a while. It absolutely catapulted me out into a place that I had to literally, it wasn't just even a thing of crawling back. Like I had to get help to come back. And I think, it was, of course, hard probably for everyone around to see, but then also like my kids, everyone also had their own pain. But I think it was really hard for my youngest daughter, Mabel, because she was the only one still living at home. And she was 13 or 14. And, I wasn't available. There are things about it that makes me feel really ashamed, but I also have to own that part of my failure rather than just being like, oh my God, I'm such a terrible person. I went through all those emotions. But I think healing is also a thing of like trying to understand it better and to let it make me a better person rather than a worse human being.
And I think your honesty is very powerful in that respect as well, because the only way you can allow that to happen is if you're brutally honest with yourself. And then to bring that to the page is a real gift for the reader. There's one moment where you say you were going for dinner, a family dinner, and Mabel...
It was Mabel's birthday.
Okay, it was Mabel's birthday.
Yeah.
And she saw you...
I was outside, like someone had a bottle of red wine and I was like drinking out of a bottle of red wine. I mean, I drank. It was like I had no bottom. Like after my mother died, I just like... my anxiety went so high that I just, and I think when she first died, we were all drinking, like all the adults, you know, because she was 66, my mother, and she was such a life force. So she was 6 years older than I am today, you know what I mean? And you know, her parents got really old. I just assumed she's going to get really old. It's like, what are we going to do with her when she's like 90? Like, but I didn't stop drinking. Like everyone else kind of chilled out after the initial shock and wore off. And, you know, once the funeral happened and stuff like that, I just couldn't, I was like thinking that it was sort of calming me down, but it kind of did for a short period of time and then it comes back. So it was like dreadful, really. Yeah, Mabel just said, I can't do this. And we have some really great friends in Sweden, and one of her school friends. And basically her mother, Ulrika, just said, she can come and live with us, which she did. And Mabel was there for a while and she, you know, loved her like one of her own. Thank God for that. And it's like, I always say this like several times a day, you know, it takes a village. It actually takes a village. It's kind of important that you put the right people inside your village. But, you know?
Yes.
Even the worst shit in life brings some kind of weird gifts. You know, you can't see it when you're going through it. But it's also allowed us to be very close.
That's exactly
you know what I mean?
What I think. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
You might not understand the meaning when you're in it, but in the fullness of time, any failure, any disaster will potentially teach you something meaningful.
Yeah.
And it might just teach you that you survived it, but that's enough.
Yeah. Of course, it matters. It depends on where you go with it, how you know, if you're able to kind of surrender. Sometimes, I mean, I know that I had to kind of surrender to my own madness and just be like, okay, like, I need to sort this shit out.
Well, that's not the last you'll hear of Mabel in this interview, because she has been on How to Fail. I'm gradually
collecting. And she loves you.
I love her. She came to my house. She met my cat.
Oh, wow.
And your sister by another Mr. Andy Oliver, who is a dear mutual friend.
My beautiful, blessed.
I mean, such a beautiful person, and threaded through your memoir in the most generous way. So you'll hear more about them, but let's get on to your failures. So your first failure is that you say you're not a disciplined person, which means that you failed your creativity at times.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. How does the lack of discipline manifest itself?
Creativity and the magic of creativity. I've always felt that you don't own it. You open yourself up to it. Sometimes, of course, it just comes at you kind of coincidentally. But I think that you can't be like, okay, if I have 2 glasses of wine and I relax and then I get up and jump around on the stage, I'm going to catch the Holy Ghost. I think it's like you have to earn it. And actually, the more you sit with your craft in a way, and the more you practice, the more maybe open you can be. And I think that, you know, I won't say that I haven't put in time, but I think also, and you could even go back to what we were just talking about, having a lot of things in life going on all at the same time, and being a woman and a mother, that actually at the end of the day, finding the space to go into, my space to just kind of sit there has not happened because of lots of other things going on. But I think sometimes because of my sort of insecurity that I have with my own ability, I have also avoided going into that space because it's hard.
Right.
Yeah,
and you'd
so
rather not
sometimes
take the risk
so
that you're not enough.
Yeah. So sometimes I've just gone to my pots, and cooked something instead, because I think I have a similar communication. And then I think sometimes that I know that I'm quite good at taking care of people, feeding people. And Andy and I, my dear beloved Andy Oliver, we've done that so much, and taken a lot of strength and built a lot of our own personal confidence in that world. Sometimes I understood that better. There is a process of work and unpeeling and concentration and focus. And sometimes I've just felt like, okay, well, I'm just going to go around the corner and go to the shops instead of having to go through all of that.
You mentioned that sometimes you just want to go to the shops rather than sitting down and creating. But one of your most famous songs came about from a visit to the shops, didn't it? Buffalo Stance.
Yeah. Buffalo Stance. And when we were living in Edith Road, I was walking to the supermarket, and just something in the tread and the crunch of the leaves under my shoe, I just started, who's that gigolo on the street? Little chink, crack, crack. And then I just went into the store. And actually, Manchild, the first verse, happened on a bus. So sometimes I think, as much as now to kind of contradict what I was saying about going into a room and writing or something, I think that also I'm also the kind of person that, sometimes when I think too hard on something, it can't happen. So when I'm in action, in the shower, just putting some conditioner in my hair, sometimes a lost word or something that I haven't been able to kind of put my hand on will just come. And I think that if I think about all the times I've sat in the kitchen, doing other stuff and then just working or having my cassette player that are going at the same time.
Do you have a cassette player?
I did. Not anymore. Now I have a telephone.
Happened to us all.
Yes.
Yeah.
One time Bono walked past me
Sorry,
in this weird
just
club.
A moment of applause for the start of that sentence. So one time Bono walked past you.
Yeah,
go ahead.
He was doing a kind of warm-up U2 gig. We were in this club in Paris, and he said, I can feel the songs around your head. And I nearly cried. It kind of summed it all up, and I think that what I've been guilty of doing is that I go into intense periods of making an album. And of course, I've done so much of that work together with Cameron, my husband. And then sort of when an album's done and the promo's done, and then I just sort of dither off. And I don't necessarily sit and write. And it's a bit more like I'm just out in life collecting songs.
That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I would think, is that you produce this gorgeous harvest of creativity, and then the field needs to recover. It needs to lay fallow for a bit, and you need to do your cooking and your being and your community. Otherwise, there's no well to draw from.
Yeah, there's nothing to talk about. And I agree with that. Even today, after I've been here, I'm going to do a rehearsal with Ezra Collective. And I'm terrified. You know what I mean? I'm terrified that I'm going to get on the mic and it's going to sound terrible, and I think I've struggled with that a lot.
I wonder if that's because the creativity is so muse-like that you worry one day it might just not be there. You're not in control of it. But I want you to know that it's such a trite thing to say, but you are enough. Like, you are brilliant just being you. That you, on what you consider to be a bad day, is better than 98% of other people. Because you bring you to it. That's
And
what the
that's
key
all
is.
you can do, isn't it?
Yes.
You can only bring you to it. And I think that is maybe where my personal rebellion, just to keep going around in this conversation, has been this kind of responsibility to know that it's not going to work unless you're you.
Yes.
Me.
Yes. It's like you're rebelling against
Nothing is going to work, you know?
you have to rebel against your own insecurity.
And yeah.
Yes. And how much of that do you think is related to addiction and fear of addiction? Because you saw your stepfather, Don, live with heroin addiction for a long time. And there's a thread there, I feel, about sort of chaos and creativity and maybe the molding of the two. Is there an associated fear in your head that if you go too far into creativity, it could undo you?
I don't think so. I think that maybe I'm fundamentally a bit lazy, to be perfectly honest. You know what I mean?
That's not quite as profound.
It's not as profound, but I think that it's like there's something, and it's like once I'm in, I would not let it go, whatever it is I'm doing, until it feels, until like I want to express myself so much better than I'll ever be able to do with words. I think also like my voice, do you know what I mean? Like if I'd put the time in, speaking of going back to the failure, of like really working on my voice much more. Because I think I'm a natural singer, but I'm not like a particularly amazing singer. Like I sing, I think, with my heart, I know that if I worked in my voice a lot more, that it would make a huge difference. So
what's it like then seeing your daughter, Mabel, be in this industry of music and creativity? You must have been scared for her to begin with, I imagine.
Yeah, it's like a mixture. Like I'm obviously incredibly proud. What scares me is the kind of lion's den of like, the kind of the so-called industry, and just how kind of throwaway it makes us are all sort of replaceable. And this goes for all, because all of my kids make music, I mean, Mabel is genius and I adore her, but Tyson also sings, Naima makes music. But, if looking at her, if we're talking about Mabel in particular being in that part of the, the sort of pop world, that, it's going to break, that it would, break her beauty, because she is so incredibly gifted. And when I look at her, like, I love everything that she does, but I can also feel like she's only just starting. And then in the eyes of some places in the industry, they would say, oh, she's having a comeback. And I'm like, coming back from fucking what? I hate that expression. It's like, I'm not coming back. And I feel like now she's just on a journey of like discovery. But I mean, it's like, even if you're ultra famous, you've got to be allowed to grow. Mm-hmm. And I think that pressure of like having to get that everything has to be so fucking choreographed, it's terrifying. But it also like, it sort of takes away the grains in something that make it,
real and flawed and beautiful because of the flaws.
And will give you hairs on, make your hairs on your arms stand up. It's like, so it's a hard game.
So your next failure is about Ian Dury. Tell us this story.
Well, this failure, I was possibly one of the worst, funniest things that I've ever served, together with Andrea. So we'd been to Scotland with a friend, and this really great friend of us, Jock MacDonald, Scottish Jock, took us to visit a friend of his, and he made this pizza for us that was like amazing. Somehow he baked the bottom, then he seemed to have he put the sauce on it at the end as well. It was just like this really kind of creative, inventive, really great pizza. So Andy and I were going to visit Ian Dury. I knew him because my dad, Don, played with him over a period of time and toured with him, and they had a huge bromance. They loved each other so much. And we'd seen Ian at a party, I think. Anyway, he said, come over. He lived down on the river side in these beautiful mansion houses, by Hammersmith, just by that beautiful bridge. So we went over there to make this pizza, and it was like never ending. The dough never rose. We just kind of gave up on it in the end, put it in the oven. I guess we put the sauce and basically made it into a pizza and baked it. But it was basically like this tabletop. I mean, you couldn't cut it with a knife. It was like brick hard. And Ian, I mean, bless him, he had a really amazing sense of humor. So he was just kind of laughing his head off. But Ian just never let us forget, and would always bring it up, that night with the bloody pizza.
Normally, I ask people what they think their failures have taught them. I'm assuming this one, has it taught you to be able to make pizza? Or
I think that it taught me to, kind of sit back and have some respect for the art of making pizza. And the science of dough. I baked before, so I don't quite know. We both had. Also I think it's also taught me something about being better at accepting that some things fail and that it's okay. Because I think we felt quite cut up that we were serving something, putting something on the table.
For Ian Dury.
For Ian Dury. That was basically inedible. And it was quite cringy and terrible. But we did laugh a lot about it.
And
it was really funny.
Yeah.
We got the anecdote. Here we are talking about this.
It was meant
crazy
to be.
Event.
And I think the other thing that anecdote brings home to me, again, is how many incredible people you've met. Please tell us about James Baldwin.
I was very young when I met him, right? I was 4.5, coming up to 5. We might have seen him a few other times in New York when I was growing up, but I remember him. And I don't remember him just because, that was the time when you met James Baldwin. Wow. I remember him because of his spirit and his eyes and because he was obviously an amazing man and human being. And I just basically, we had traveled from Stockholm to Turkey. My Don was on a kind of journey of there were quite a few Turkish musicians living in Stockholm, and he had started learning and studying the music and the kind of rhythm sequences. And I think there was a concert in Ankara, and one of the musicians that he'd been working with in Stockholm drove with us. And it was quite a crazy journey. To me, it seemed like it took forever, but I think it was only maybe 5 days or something. And then we went to Istanbul, and there, I think that my parents just kind of ran into James Baldwin on the street. He was there, he was living there, working on a play. And he would have been if so often was, hey, Don, hey, whoa, Moki. And we sat, I just really remember sitting it was kind of a gray day, and it was not a hot day, because I think we went there in the winter months. And just sitting at this table, they were talking, and I just remember his eyes, actually, more than anything. And then Don ended up doing music for the play. And it's one of those things where I think that a recording has turned up quite recently. He might have played for one of the shows, but then I think the music was just used. But I also feel like I can remember being inside the theater where their rehearsals were going on. But then, so the memory is so
Wow.
funny. But yeah, it's like, I think as a child, you meet certain people that actually you remember them because they really talk to you rather than them speaking, through your parents or just going through the motions. Oh, I feel like I remember it because it was a very direct communication.
And you
I
say
don't.
in the book that you remember his kindness.
Yeah, that's what I think I mean when I say
Yeah.
that I remember his eyes because his eyes were like a whole universe, you know. He was
Stop it. I
such a
feel like
smart guy.
I'm sitting here and you're writing songs.
Oh, right.
Bono was right. Like your turn of phrase is so exquisite.
Oh, I feel so
Sorry to make
stupid
you.
a lot of times.
Sorry to make you feel embarrassed.
No, I'll take it.
Okay, we've spoken about Don. We haven't yet spoken about your biological father,
Ahmadou.
who was also a musician.
Yeah, Ahmadou, yeah. Yes.
And I think another thing that comes out loud and clear from the memoir is how much love you have for both. There's no bitterness there. I don't know how hard you had to work on that, but it's quite clear that you feel very at peace with the fact that these two men shaped you.
They were two very different men, and Don for sure was my dad. Like, he was there unconditionally every day. And I was a bit older when I found out that I had a different father to Eagle Eye. So I was like 6, 7.
And you
When my
found out
mother told me,
you were looking at a photo album and she said,
she was just, no, I think it was just loose black and white pictures. And then there was this photograph of 4 people. And I think the other 3 people were white people. And then there was this man in a stripy, I think it was like I feel like it was a blue and white striped top. Anyway, and I was like, who's that? I didn't recognize him. So I was like, who is he? And I was sitting on my mother's lap and she just like, oh, he's someone I know. And then we kept going. And then she went back and then she was like, I have to tell you something. And then she told me, actually, that man is your father. And yeah, it was like a very surreal thing to have happen, actually, because the foundations totally shifted. And I mean, I was only 6.5 years old or something. So I understood what it meant, but obviously there was also a part of me that we weren't like instantly close, but we were also obviously of each other. So there was this kind of like intense kind of intimacy, which I think I found quite difficult at first, like just not really knowing how to handle it, because I felt it and I also felt like his immense love. But he was so, incredibly kind, but he was also quite remorseful, I think, of like that he'd let all that time go and that we hadn't known each other. And so I started visiting, got to know, became really close with my sister Tio and my brother Chano. And then when I was 15, he took us to Sierra Leone for the first time. And that was like incredible. And then by then I also felt like with Ahmadou that we had something special. And I think I felt very conscious of that from quite early on, which I think was really helpful because I was his firstborn. So there was something in that, in the row of siblings that I have. Because I think we're 9 now. I just found out about another brother. My father died like 6 years ago or something. I think it was 2017. So I met one of my brothers in Sierra Leone for the first time.
So your family is ever expanding, which actually, given what we've been talking about, is somewhat beautiful. That expansiveness of this community and this love, this constant evolution.
Yeah. But I quite early on said to my father, when one of my really good friends was working in a nursery in Stockholm, and a woman came in to pick up one of the kids that my friend was looking after, and mentioned the name of the father, and it was my father, like, oh, this is how, something about Ahmadou. So she told me, she was like, I think I'm looking after one of your siblings at my nursery. So I was like to my father, like, yo, like, listen, you're going to have to, like, I would like to know who my siblings are. Also, there's a kind of risk factor that, like, what if one of my kids goes out and falls in love with, like, someone who's her uncle, actually, at the end of the day? Like, it's weirder things have happened, you know. But more than anything, it was like, look, we exist. Like, we need to know each other. I mean, Don, going back to your question, like, Don brought me up, but, like, he was always very respectful of my father. So I think that was so important, because it also meant that I could, the sort of a more complicated emotional aspect that was probably going on inside of me, it allowed it to kind of find its way.
Yes.
You
to
know?
be expressed.
And then, of course, you know, the trips that we took to Sierra Leone and meeting our family, and that incredible importance of knowing, like, that part of who we are. It changed my life, you know.
Your final failure is about A Tribe Called Quest. I mean, there's no seamless link, but this really does feel like a failure to you, doesn't it? Because you're disappointed. What happened?
So I went to a party for Young MC in New York. De La Soul were there. Loads of people were there. It was a big night. At De La Soul, we were on the dance floor together, having the best time. And I knew them a little bit. And they introduced me to this guy, Q-Tip.
Oh my God.
I was like,
sorry.
Great. I was like, oh, great, Q. And he was like, yeah, I'm making this record. And we just had the best time. And I just loved them so much. And of course, I'd been listening to the De La Soul. Yeah, I knew De La Soul. I'd been listening to the album. It was like a complete, you know, lifesaver. And then Q-Tip was like, making this record. Of course, it was the first Tribe Called Quest record, which is a masterpiece. Will you come and sing on a track? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come and sing on a track. And then he took my number. I went back. We'd rented a house upstate New York. My phone rings one day, and I have this black phone hanging on the wall with one of those long wires. And I was probably in the kitchen walking around with the thing, holding the baby. And he was like, can you know, we're ready to do that track. Will you come and do it? And I was like, oh, God. I mean, I was like touched. Don't get me wrong, but I was like really tired. I was probably something else going on. I probably had promo I was going to do. And probably, going back to the first question, there was something in me that was terrified. Like, what if I go there and I'm not able to, maybe I'm not what they think that I am. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
One of those things. And I think that was also why I put that as one of my failures in there, because I think there was something deeper in there than just feeling tired. There was something that was like, and so it was easier to say no. And now I'm like, every time I listen to the record, I'm like, I could have been on that record. But also, like, I'm cool with it, because, like, I can look at the thing and, like, talk about it and know that, like, yeah, it was a bit of a mess up, and I'm really disappointed in myself that I didn't do it. But also, like, I love the album so much. Like, that body of music has carried me through 1,000 other failures.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And it's still
maybe it was meant
so
to be
good. Maybe it, like,
maybe
you just don't know.
Listen to it in the same way. If
yeah,
you want
like, and then we had an interesting thing later where we were going to work on make some music together. But his initial idea, and I was like, I love this guy, was to write a song called The 28th Day about periods and the woman's cycle. And that was his idea.
That's an amazing idea.
So, he's a good man. And then we just started doing all this kind of research. Then 3D for Massive Attack found some nutty comic that was about a 28-day cycle of people who, I guess ran with the moon, maybe like a vampire type thing. So we were just collecting all this kind of material, but then somehow it just dissipated like things.
I feel like this is the moment to bring it back into the universe and to make it happen.
So we're talking about it. That's the good thing about talking about things, right?
Yes.
You can then kind of materializes again.
Exactly. Yeah. There's also a podcast called 28 Days Later. No, that's the movie. There's a podcast called 28 Days, I think, which is all about the cycle, which you should listen to.
Okay.
You are, although I can't believe it looking at you, you're 60. If that opportunity, I know it can't, but if it were to come up again, would you now feel I'm enough, I can do this?
Yes. It's not always about getting it right. That's not always the point of the story. The point of the story is sometimes that you just have to do it regardless. And then maybe it'll end up being something amazing or maybe not. So I think now I would probably just be like, yeah, let's just go for it and see what happens. Because collaborations are funny, aren't they? Even if you put two magical people or great people together, it doesn't mean that what they do together. And so, my experience of collaborations is some of them have turned out really great.
Yeah, Youssou N'Dour.
Yeah, 7 Seconds was definitely amazing. And I think so much of the music I've made is collaborative. But sometimes, I've been in the studio with someone and you think, oh, wow, this is... I've been wanting to make a track with Honey Dijon, but I'm also kind of terrified of going in the studio.
Would you make a track with Mabel?
Maybe. We've kind of been cross-collaborating. We just did a cover for a magazine, an Elle cover in Sweden together. And we've kind of come to a place naturally where we can like swim in the same stream in different lanes, and it feels really great. But maybe I'm just destined to like be your biggest fan kind of thing.
Oh, Neneh Cherry. I can't wait to see what you do next. As Bono said, I can see the songs around your head. It has been an honor to meet you, but a joy to chat to you. I've loved it so much. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been, I really enjoyed it. We took a fun journey.
And you're staying, even better, you're staying to do Failing with Friends.
Okay.
Where you get to answer, it's not about you. You're probably breathing a sigh of relief as the gorgeously generous, introverted person you are. It's about the listeners who've written in with their problems. Okay.
Much more exciting and interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please do follow How to Fail to get new episodes as they land on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please tell all your friends. This is an Elizabeth Day and Sony Music Entertainment original podcast. Thank you so much for listening.